go over a ridge, and I'm looking down through some big old growth timber, and I see movement. Pull up my binos, and I'm like, holy crap. Like, I'm shaking, I'm freaking out in my mind already, and it was him.
Your buck this year, tell me that story.
All right.
It's a giant 5x4 typical.
He's a 5x5.
Oh yeah, 5x5. But
5x5.
Generally, I mean, kind of like a big 4x4, and then the G2 on the one side, and the left side splits, and then a drop tine on the right side. Just an epic, just an incredible blacktail.
Yeah, he's a pretty buck.
Yeah, and he's like over 140, right?
Yeah, Wyatt scored him.
We scored him. He's got I think 141 inch typical 4-point frame, and then he's got a 6-inch drop tine here and an inch and a quarter tine back there.
Like
so he's
148
and 3/8.
3/8,
Yeah, pretty amazing buck.
That's a big blacktail. So that's pretty crazy story.
Yeah. So I've kind of touched on a few different things.
If you talk about if you're the unedited version, you can make it like you can make it an outdoor channel story if you want. Perfect shot, dead.
That's what happened.
That's bow hunting.
But I just, had some other details in there that made it very interesting.
Yeah, tell me what happened.
Technically, it was a perfect shot at the end. No, I think that's ruining it. So I'm going to start from fresh here. Is that season was moved back a week. I was coming off a hard year. It seemed like everything was not going my way. I was putting in the effort.
With California,
Oregon, Idaho, Spring Bear. There was a lot of archery opportunities that had usually gone my way that didn't. And so it was one of those things where I'm just wondering what's going on. Like, why is everything so hard? Why is it all against me? And I'm working harder than ever before. I had just come off a year too where I'd had a knee surgery and health complications with an autoimmune, and I still got it done. I killed more animals than I'd killed like in some prior years.
Yeah.
And I was overcoming a lot of health things. And this year I was more able than I've been in a long time. And yet nothing was going my way.
Do you guys think that, we'll get back to that, but it used to be so frustrating because I would like work my ass off and could not kill. And I was just like, I would tell myself, nobody's working as hard as me. Yeah. How is everybody else killing? Because it seemed like everybody was. And I'm like, I'm working harder than them. So is it frustrating when you feel like you're just giving all you got and it's not happening?
Yeah.
Because most things in life, they say, well, if you work hard enough, you're going to get what you want. Correct. With bow hunting,
there's no guarantees.
Doesn't guarantee anything. You might work your ass off and you just work your ass off.
Yeah. There's no guarantees on the desired outcome. You can try and try, and sometimes it doesn't go your way. So our season dates were moved back a week. I get the text the day I'm leaving of this buck that I was going to go after. And I was like packing my bags.
Yeah.
And I was talking to my wife about like, do I still do my game plan, what I was going to do? And she's like, yeah. And you need to get out there. And I was feeling pretty bummed. I was not great, right? Pretty upset. So I get in there and it just feels so refreshing to just, clear your mind. Like I'm just hiking, just breathing hard. And that's all that matters. It's just, you really feel your effort. Get in there, I camp out. And so that night I had put in a camera, and of course I screwed up on that. So I have no photos to look at on a camera that had been in since spring. And that was pretty awesome. So things are just stacking up.
Yeah.
And so I fall asleep that night knowing it's going to be, new slate. Like, let's just get this done. And next morning I still hunt, which means, I could talk forever on this topic, but I cover a lot of ground until I find sign or any reason to slow up. And then I hunt pretty slow until you get senses or whatever that says, no, I need to cover. I need to go somewhere else. So I was covering ground, I had a little buck run by me that morning, and a couple more miles goes by, take lunch break, a couple more miles go by, and then I'm sneaking through some timber. It's really dense timber, so you can only see maybe 70 yards. Look up, and the sun is gleaming on a buck, like just beautiful, tall framed 4x4, kind of like more of a pink light antler, looking at me. I get my binos up, see he's a good buck, range him 70 yards, a little too far to shoot. He's staring at me, and we just have a stare down. I don't move. Buck eventually walks off. So I'm like, hey, maybe I'll get another opportunity. I close the distance on him. I'm going through the timber. I look up, and a forked horn's running right at me. And so I freeze, get my camera out. I'm trying to get video of this foreghorn, and I'm realizing that it's running from something. And that's when I see this buck. This buck's chasing him.
Okay.
So he's chasing him around, and they're just having this little chaotic battle of get away from my doe. Next thing I know, after about 10 minutes, this buck is pushing the doe towards me. So here they come through the timber, and I like to film, and I got one little clip of this buck moving through the timber, but the most important thing is coming home successful. When I'm away from my wife, my kids, like as much as I want to film and document the whole thing, it's way more important I'm successful. And when you see a buck with that frame, I had not actually seen the drop tine, but when you see a buck with that frame, like I could care less what the camera's doing, and I'm by myself, right? So doe goes through some trees. I'd already ranged it 40 yards, waiting for the buck. Buck's gonna step through, draw back, I'm pinned in, ready to go, and then I try to stop him, and he's just kind of doing his thing, walking, and I swing over, pin in, touch off, whap, I hit my jacket. The buck whirls right when I touched off. And so I see him take a couple bounds and right back in line with the doe. And I pull up my binos, look at his side, and he's clean. And so I was like, okay, if anything, I would have hit him back, and that would have been a bad hit back, but I don't see that. So I'm watching him, he's right in line with the doe, and they disappear into the trees again. But he's not really spooked or alarmed. So I'm like, I probably missed. So I give him a few minutes, kind of collect myself. It happened quick, thinking through the details, what I remembered. And that's very important, by the way, because we could tell ourselves so many different stories of what happened, but you really got to collect yourself after moments like that. So I go up, I'm looking at the ground, I don't see the arrow. And then what if I hit him? So I take a few more steps looking at the ground. Sure enough, there's a little bit of blood. So I know I hit this buck. And now it's like, it's go time. Like I have to recover this deer. It's just different mindset. Go through the timber, sneaking very slow. I see the doe. I see a foreghorn, same one that had been run off. I don't see him. I'm like, did I get lucky? And then
Sneak one in there?
No, I didn't. No, his head's up. And I don't see the dropper. All I see is this 5-point side on this side.
Still good enough.
Still didn't know he's a dropper.
He looks great that side.
It looks like an elk on that side.
I know.
So I knew I'd hit him, and I took a quick shot opportunity when I had it. And so I took a longer shot, like a 75-yard shot, because at that point, if you injure an animal, you want to get another arrow in him as soon as possible. And I missed. It was a quick shot, and also I wasn't bubbled in. And so for people that know, when you're shooting on steep side slopes, if you didn't look at that bubble, your arrow's going to go somewhere else. And it did that. So he takes off. I go up there, and there wasn't a ton of blood at all really to deal with. And after he'd run, there was a little bit more, and I'm dropping onyx pins to try to map where he's headed. And it's running out of blood. I'm getting later in the day. It was noon.
Like how much blood were you finding?
Kind of looked like maybe I hit an artery. And it looked like every time he went over a log, there was a smear. And then it kind of quickly changed over to drops. So I knew it wasn't a fatal hit. It wasn't a body hit. It was something low. And usually you could tell a lot from a blood trail. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that maybe on this story. So hopefully you're still following along here. So the blood ran out, and it was about 3 p.m. And I'm realizing that at this point in the dark timber, I'm not going to be able to really get a good shot opportunity if I bump him. And so instead, I dropped down into some bluffy, steep stuff and was zigzagging to try to cut like a blood spot to be able to track, where I could go for the next day. And that was my game plan, was like, I know he's not fatally hit. I know it was probably it was something enough to follow, but not a great hit. And he'd be alive the next day. Like I knew this for certain. So it's almost dark, and I peel off, and I go back to my tent. I text my dad. I had one bar service. Text my dad, and I'm like, hey, this is what happened. Told him the full story. And he's like, hey, if you had something to go off of, I'd help you, but you don't. So, I'll see you tomorrow maybe or whatever. But next day goes, I wake up right at daylight. I'm hiking through the timber. Of all things, my dad and I meet up. And so I tell him the story again, and I explain to him in great detail what I'm planning to do now. And I'm like, I just have to find this buck. And
was he camped up there too, in a different place, or did he walk in?
Different place, yeah. And it just so happened we crossed paths. We didn't plan it. And so I explain the story, and he tells me kind of again, like, hey, if you had something to go off of, and then us together are going to make double the sound, double the noise.
Yeah.
It would never really work out.
Right.
And what stands out to me is that I described a process of looking for the buck that did not match what I ended up doing. And I was telling him how I thought, maybe if an injured animal wanted to go bed by itself, it would go out in a flat. And so I described I was going to go start gridding a flat, and hopefully I jump this deer and get another arrow in it. And I didn't do that. I went back to the last blood. And I get down on the ground, and I'm just doing every like forensic work to like, where did this thing go? And he took a slight turn from where I'd last had blood. And so I followed another 30 yards. And then sure enough, it's like I'm on the tracks.
And was there snow or just in the...
No snow.
Okay.
Just dark timber, pine needles.
Okay.
Like nothing. Every once in a while, there's a smear on a log. So I had already assumed I hit low leg.
Yeah.
For him to have whirled away, I had to have cut something low.
Yeah.
So after I split up from Dad, I got on that blood, followed it, dropped another pin. Sure enough, I had a line now of where he probably went. And I dropped down into some more cliffs, and I zigzagged again for another hour and a half, come back up to a spot where I'd left off to go into the cliffs, go over a ridge, and I'm looking down through some big old growth timber, and I see movement. Pull up my binos, and I'm like, holy crap. Like, I'm shaking, I'm freaking out in my mind already. And it was him. And not only that, I had not seen the dropper until that point, and the sun's coming through the timber, and it's like glowing. It's like shining. And I'm like, I never saw that. Like, what the heck? This is got to be the same buck. It's like a chocolate antlered. We don't have a ton of bucks that would resemble this frame. This is an anomaly. Like, I pick a lot of sheds. I brought some. They don't look like that. The buck's 40 yards. And I'm thinking, like, that was a God thing. He brought this buck right back to me. Like, how is that possible? Like, this is going to happen. I'm super confident. Buck puts his head down, and he puts his head behind a tree. I draw back. I pin in. And then I have this habit when I'm shooting downhill to keep my finger behind the trigger on the release. And then it's one of those things I don't think about. I just do it because it feels more secure. And then so I bring my finger around to touch it, and I move off target. Like off the buck.
Why?
That resets.
Have you ever done it?
It kind of goes back to like, the target panic thing that we touched on.
Yeah.
You're afraid of touching that trigger. So like with instructing archery, you talk to people about this. When you come back to full draw.
Put your finger in
if
front.
you're aiming with your finger behind the trigger, you're just wasting time.
Yeah.
Because time at full draw.
You got to re-aim then.
Time that you're fatiguing. So you bring your finger around. It's like when you do that, that just resets everything.
Yeah.
So like what he's saying, he's on the buck pinned in, he brings his finger around, and now he's
right.
reset.
So you're
He's
off.
gotta come
So
back in.
like normally when people aim, when they restart, they come back down from the top. I don't know if you come from the top or the bottom or side.
Yeah.
Okay, so once you aimed one time with your finger behind the trigger, then you come around, then you got to come back up off the animal to come down again, right? Essentially.
Kind of resets your breathing. Yeah.
I mean, my finger was behind the trigger, but the pin was perfect. Like my brain was saying, this is when you touch off.
Yeah.
But it wasn't ready.
That would have been. That would have been if the finger's on the other side. Yeah.
And so in the process of coming in front, I move off target just enough, but I was already committed. My brain was already saying, you're squeezing the trigger. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's when I touch off, and I see my arrow going towards this giant limb on an old growth tree.
Oh no.
And ricochet. And then all I see is arrow flying over the top of the buck's back, like cartwheeling over its back.
Oh,
and I just
no.
like fall in a heap.
Yeah.
And buck tears off.
Yeah.
Like nothing was wrong, right? Tears off.
You probably heard the arrow hit the limb.
Yes.
Did you hear 2 hits?
I did not.
Yeah.
Yep. I was convinced, absolutely convinced that I did not.
That you missed.
That I missed.
You're probably ready to crawl in a hole.
I wanted to. I mean, I was flooded with like, how many times have I screwed up on that same shot?
Yeah.
Shooting downhill on a big buck back when I didn't know how to cut yardage. Like there's an evolution of archery and learning that has taken place to get to a point where now I can do it. But I reverted to some old habit that was deep in my brain. And I wish I did not have that old habit. And it happened.
It's adrenaline. It's like, when you see the drop time, there's so much that you're so close to an animal, like a once in a lifetime animal.
Yeah.
Your brain does.
Bad.
Yeah. You've been dreaming of that moment. Your brain does crazy things.
And I was also on that, like that super intense mode that we get into where it's like, I'm tracking to kill something.
Yeah.
Like it's like this mindset switch. So I was like hyper focused on just like, this is a dead buck. And so when I fall down, I was just completely like, that's over.
Yeah.
And I had the thought of like
Quitting bow hunting.
Every time.
just picking up the rifle. No, I just was like, wow, like that happened so fast and I don't get that back.
Yeah.
I screwed up.
I've screwed up a once in a lifetime opportunity.
Yeah.
This will never happen again. I've had that feeling myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
It hurts.
the two thoughts that came to mind is one, what if I can find him again? Mm-hmm. The other thought is I probably screwed up. I'll never see him again. I could also just go look for another buck.
Yeah.
But I was more on the camp of like, oh, this is a giant. I saw that dropper. Mm-hmm. What if he's just down the hill 100 yards back to feeding? He didn't know what happened. Mm-hmm. He had no idea I was there. So I go with the option A.
Yeah.
Maybe he's right down there ready to be shot again. Mm-hmm. And so I sneak down the ridge about 20, 30 yards and I'm looking through the timber waiting, nothing. So I sneak back real quietly, look for my arrow. I don't find it. And I'm like, I kind of saw it flip over his back and I'm looking down through the trees, don't see it. So go back and I kind of sit down in the timber again and I'm looking down, just hoping I catch some movement. Maybe he's down there chasing a doe around something, nothing. I'm seeing a game trail that zigzags down through this old growth timber, really, really steep hillside, nearly vertical. And I'm almost making it up with my eyes, but I'm like, that looks like the buck ran on that trail.
Like a scuff mark or something.
Mark.
Yeah.
I'm like, I have to go down there and look at that. Mm-hmm. Go down. Absolutely. I'm like, this is the buck's tracks. Mm. I followed it maybe 2 steps and it goes off to the right, off the trail. Now it's going straight down.
Like tracks splayed out type of running buck. Yeah.
Yep. And it's going like straight, absolutely down, like free fall down.
That's not normal.
Not normal. Mm-hmm. No, usually he would have kept going the direction he was headed.
Yeah.
Hit a trail, stayed on it.
Yep. So maybe I take 20 more steps and I look from behind a tree. My buck was laying down, unable to move, basically dead. And it didn't add up. Mm-hmm. All I knew is like I could have gone the rest of my life knowing that buck was fine.
Yeah.
That I had not hit him.
Right.
Turns out he's laying on the ground. I'm not going to ask him what's going on. So I load another arrow. I load another arrow and absolutely shoot him again. He's like down. I run back up to the top of like a little mountain peak where I wanted to text my dad to tell him what happened because I'd just seen him that morning.
Yeah.
I get a text and it says, I just shot a monster.
From Wyatt.
Wyatt.
Yeah.
And what did I do? I called you and made like no sense.
Yeah. He calls me. So I'm like freaking out because I shot, a big buck. And I had just sent that text and he calls me within like, immediately. Like, I can't believe my text even sent. And it's also surprising that we both had service at this time. We're some nasty stuff. But anyways, he calls me. He's like, dude, I killed a huge buck too. He's got a drop tine. He's like, I saw the drop tine. Yeah. Before I drew back, I saw the drop tine. And I'm just like, oh, dude.
I was like out of my mind a little bit.
I'm like, okay, it's got a drop tine. How big is it? He's like, I don't know. Like his frame's like 130s and then he's got a drop tine and other points.
Had you even went up to him yet?
Didn't even touch it.
No, he tells me that. He's like,
freaking out.
He was just like dead. So I walked away. And then in the closing, shortly after of our conversation, I'm like, well, make sure he's still there. Good luck.
Really?
He rolled a little bit.